Hey friends, welcome back to another video. I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. This is a tradition here on Booktube. Most people have done it already. I'm a little bit behind, but this is a mid-year check-in. I'm answering 15 questions. I kind of combined hodgepodge together a bunch of different questions that I've seen people answer because I feel like the original tag and the original questions have morphed and some have been added, some have been taken away. But overall, I'm here to check in about my reading year so far, how it's gone, some standouts, what are some good books, not good books, surprising reads. So let's kick it off. Question number 1 to me is the stats. How many books have I read? What's the standout genre? What's my favorite format? Those kind of things. So I keep track of my reading in 3 places: Goodreads, Storygraph, and a personal Excel sheet from Hordback Hoarder that I use to keep track. Overall, I've read 116 books from January 1 to June 30th. Many of these are picture books though. About 79 were non-children book reads. I guess close to 80 is like the normal reading amount. And I also DNF'd or did not finish 7 books. In terms of genre, my biggest is picture books. I don't really have the best way to keep track of genre because picture books are kind of their own thing, but they're also, some of them are, you know, fantasy, some of them are nonfiction as well. I don't know, but picture books are the most chunk of books that I've read because they're easy to read. And I was doing Picture This Readathon also for my bee-themed reading vlog. Read a bunch of picture books for that as well. But apart from picture books, nonfiction, specifically nature and memoir, is my biggest 2 in nonfiction that I read a lot of, and historical fiction, of course. I'm at a 63% fiction, 37% nonfiction split. I'm happy with the 60-40. I would love to be 50-50 at some point, but I don't know if I'll ever get there. About 50% of my reading is adult and 34% is picture book, and the rest is middle grade and YA. YA is like very few books. My average rating is sad. It is 3.44. Really low for me. I've had almost no 5-star reads. Just not a lot of good books. A lot of 3-star, a lot of 2-star, hence the average rating, but a very meh reading year, which is a bummer because I think last year was kind of that way too. So I'm on the hunt and I'm really hoping that the latter half of 2023 is a lot more exciting. I will be having a child though, so I don't know how that's gonna go, but maybe I'll read less and they'll be better. But I also wonder if a lot of my lower average rating is because I'm reading newer books. The majority of my reading is from 2022, 2023, and 2019. Books published in those years are my top 3 chunks, and I'm just wondering if I'm not really getting along with newer fiction releases and I need to focus on backlist books or classics, or just books that have better stood the test of time than newer releases. So maybe that's a contributing factor and I'm just not vibing with new stories being told. I don't know. And lastly, for stats, the format, 42.6% is audio and 45.2% is hardcover. Again, mostly picture books or hardcovers. I'm about half-half split between physical reading and audiobook reading, although the majority of my, you know, adult novels that I read or nonfiction or etc. is being consumed by audio or a mix of both. It's just my preferred way of reading because that's just how I read more books. Moving on, question 2. What is the best book you've read so far this year? A lot of books that have been close, but nothing has been perfect. The one book that I happily gave 5 stars though was Matilda by Roald Dahl. I read this for middle grade March. I listened to the audiobook, which was impeccable. It was narrated by Kate Winslet and it was one of the best audiobook experiences I've had. I had never read this classic children's book before. I hadn't watched the movie adaptations. I still have yet to do that. So I was so pleasantly surprised. This was such a fun find. If you haven't read this children's classic for whatever reason, do yourself a favor, listen to that audiobook of it because it was fantastic. Question 3, new favorite author. I consider a favorite author if I've read 3 or more books by them that I have loved. And I don't really have anyone that has happened to this year. So I'm just gonna mention some authors that I have liked a book from or loved a book from and I'm keeping my eye on them. I mean, A.B. Harmon is my favorite author because at this point I've read, I think 4 of her books and they're all 4.5 or above. And one of her books that I read this year, which I'll mention in a later question, was incredible. So she's still a favorite. Nothing has topped her. But another favorite author illustrator for picture books is Sophie Blackall. I read The Farmhouse and loved it. I also read Hell at Lighthouse last year and loved that picture book. So she's a wonderful picture book illustrator and author that I will be keeping my eye out for. TJ Newman, she came out with Falling last year and Drowning this year. I read both of those very high stakes, plain survival thrillers. Drowning is getting a lot of love right now, so I'm definitely keeping my eye out for what she comes out next. Sophie Irwin, I'm spoiling a future question, but I really loved this historical Regency romance, and I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out on what she comes out next. And also Catherine Center. I read a book by her last year and I just thought it was good, okay, middle of the road, but this was a really fun contemporary romance that I read in January and I really got along with it. So I'm very curious now to read even more Catherine Center, to hopefully find another one that I really love and get along with. Question 4, what's the most disappointing read so far? So many disappointing reads. I also take this question as what are some of the worst books you've read this year? I have 2 very unpopular opinions. One I mentioned in my April wrap up, and that was Happy Place by Emily Henry. I don't get the hype. The characters are stupid. The decisions they make are stupid. I don't understand why people love that one. And also in June, I went on a long rant about Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros and how that book is absolute garbage. I don't understand the hype around that, but to be fair, I'm not a romance reader, so maybe, you know, Happy Place just didn't hit me. And also I'm not a fantasy romance reader, so also Fourth Wing was a way out of the box read for me. I just wanted to see what all the hype was about and I didn't understand the hype. I do have 2 reads, nothing at all compared to the previous 2 I mentioned, but these 2 are both classics that I had such high hopes for, and I was so bummed that I didn't love them like I thought I would. The first one being Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. I read Rebecca, absolutely loved Rebecca. What an incredible read. It was a favorite of mine in 2020, and I read this one and I was just a little bummed out with the character and the progression of the story. She is a beautiful writer and the setting was amazing in here, but this book was just way too depressing and sad. Again, not bad at all. This was a 3-star read, but I was just disappointed that I didn't love it because I was expecting to. Also, The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. I expected to absolutely fall in love with this book, and this was like a 2-star read. Nothing happened. The characters sucked. It was just so boring and lame, and what a bummer that this didn't live up to my expectations of being swept away by the Italian countryside and this wonderful character study. No, it was just a boring read, and I was really bummed that I didn't love it because both of these books are also beautiful. They're on my classic shelf. I mean, I don't know if I'll get rid of them yet, but yeah, didn't love them. Just so disappointing. Number 5, the biggest surprise. It's gotta be 11/22/63 by Stephen King. My first Stephen King, probably not my last. I'm willing to try more from him, but I was shocked by how much I enjoyed my reading experience with this. First of all, it's a huge book. I don't read horror. I don't love to read scary things. This book is an alternate history book. It's a wonderful character study. There's a little bit of a sci-fi element of a man time traveling, and I was just so in it. I was so invested. I loved my time with it. It was such a fun read, which again, just shocked because I thought there's no way I'm a Stephen King kind of girl, but I can't fault him for being a really good writer. Another surprising read for me I read at the very beginning of the year is The Snow Child by Ewan Ivey. You guys said it, this is a great read, and it was. And I was so pleasantly surprised because this is a slow read. There's a little bit of magical realism in here, which again, also not my usual kind of buzzwords that make me excited about a book, but this was wonderful, atmospheric, like the perfect wintry read. It also had a fairy tale retelling kind of story to it, and I was just swept away. I was so pleasantly surprised by this one. Number 6, a book that made you cry. I'm gonna mention Girl Named Samson by Amy Harmon. I mentioned Amy Harmon, she's a favorite author of mine. She comes out with historical fiction about every year, and I still have quite a bit of her backlist to read, and this was her newest release, and it was really well done. It wasn't my favorite of hers, Where the Lost Wanderer still holds the top spot, but there was this beautiful scene in it, which I won't give away because it's towards like the middle end of the book, and I just related so much to the main character's emotional reaction to a moment. I felt it in my heart. It also was the middle of the night when I was dealing with pregnancy insomnia and couldn't sleep, and I was reading this book on my Kindle in bed, and I was just crying while my husband's sleeping. But this book was fantastic overall. Amy Harmon does no wrong in my book at this point. I feel like most of her books have made me tear up at some capacity. Number 7 is a book that made you happy. I already mentioned this one, but The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This is a contemporary rom-com that just made me smile. It hit all of the right notes. It was light and fluffy and fun and a wonderful little escape. There was nothing overly gratuitous or too sexual or too over the top in it. I liked the romance. I liked the characters. It was just a great time. Another book that made me happy that I would highly recommend to anyone that loves to read, which if you're watching this, you probably do, and that is I'd Rather Be Reading: The Delights and Dilemmas of the Reading Life by Anne Vogel. This is just the perfect book for someone that loves to read and someone that loves to collect books and go to libraries. It just was filled with so many moments that were relatable and made me smile that I'm like, yeah, me too. I've thought that. I've experienced that. It is a wonderful book about books perfect for the book lover. Number 8 is a book you learned the most from. I took this question as an inspiration from Shelley Swearingen when she kind of modified into this tag, because I just think that's a great question. And not that you can't answer it with fiction, but it does kind of give a nod to a nonfiction read. The first one I'll mention is Bringing Up Bebe. One American Mother Discovers the Wisdom of French Parenting by Pamela Druckerman. Now, this wasn't the perfect parenting book. There was a lot of stuff in here that was a bit like, whoa, and some stuff that was very interesting. But I learned the most from it because this book facilitated so much discussion between my husband and I. We listened to the audiobook together, we would pause, we would take notes, we would break down chapters and what we think about that. And it was just a really fun and interesting read. I would highly recommend for newer parents that are just stepping into this journey and processing some things. And also Garden City by John Mark Comer. This is a Christian nonfiction book about work, calling, vocation, what we were made to do, how as human beings we were created to work, and what does that look like in our lives, and what is our society's take on work. And yeah, learned a lot from it. Question 9 is, what is the most beautiful book you've added to your collection this year, or that you've read? I've read 2 of these that I'll mention, but all of these I've added to my shelves this year. The first one I mentioned in June, and that is How to Be a Moonflower by Katie Daisy. This is a gorgeous illustrated book. She is a watercolor painter and illustrator. It's a beautiful book that is an ode to summer nights, so I would highly recommend for summer reading. Also makes a great gift. A book that I really enjoyed and I broke down in my bee-themed reading vlog was The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. I've always loved this edition and cover of this book. I love the bee spine, and a book that I haven't read, I don't know too much about, but I picked it because I thought the cover was gorgeous. And that is We the Drowned by Karsten Jensen. I just love this image, like the waves go through the spine and the ship in the middle. I'm not even into really books about ships and sailing and all that kind of stuff, but I couldn't pass up this gorgeous cover. Number 10 is the favorite video that I've made. I've been a little bit of a slacker this year, but for good reason. I'm pregnant and I was very sick at the beginning of the year, so I just made less videos and just have been making slightly less videos than usual. But one of my favorite videos to make every year is a bee-themed video. I made my 3rd installment of it. It is a reading vlog where I focus on reading books with bees or honey on the cover or in the title. I also love little free libraries, and I did a little free library adventure in Port Townsend, Washington. I just find a lot of gems while hunting in little free libraries, and I just loved perusing around that town. Question 11 is, what is your favorite book to screen adaptation? I love watching TV series or movies that are based on a book, and I'm actually doing a whole project where I'm keeping track of things that I've watched that have been books before they got turned into TV series or movies. A lot of them have been duds, to be honest, but one of my favorite ones that I've watched is News to the World. I read the book several years ago and I did not like it. I mean, it was fine. It was a bit of a disjointed, weird read. It was like set in the West about a man that's taking care of a young girl and trying to get her to her family. I honestly was really confused by the book and I didn't really get along with it or care too much about it. But I watched the movie with Tom Hanks and that was a great film, a wonderful film. I'd say bypass the book, forget about it, pretend it doesn't exist, just watch the movie. The movie was great. Question 12 is anticipated releases for 2023. I will mention a few that are coming out that I'm excited about. The first one being Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. I have the advanced reader copy of this. I think it comes out in August. This is Angie Kim's 2nd book. Miracle Creek I read several years back and really enjoyed it, so I'm very curious how this one's gonna go. Another one that comes out in November is The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. This author wrote The Maid, which is a very beloved mystery thriller book that came out last year, more of a cozy mystery. I really enjoyed it. Does this need to be a series? Probably not. I don't know if I'm gonna love the 2nd book. I think the author's really playing up on the success of the Finley Donovan cozy mystery series, and so we're just gonna keep going with this quirky maid character. I actually kind of have low expectations, but I am gonna read it when it comes out. And then middle grade I'm really excited about is Nothing Else But Miracles by Kate Albus. I absolutely loved A Place to Hang the Moon, one of my favorite reads last year, a wonderful middle grade historical fiction, so I'm very eager to pick this one up by her. Question 13 is, do you feel your reading tastes have changed or shifted at all this year? What's a new genre you love, a new favorite trope, or a favorite theme? Like I've said, I've had a very mediocre reading year, and I don't really know why. Maybe it's part of what's going on in my personal life, and it's just hard to love books, and I wasn't feeling physically well in the beginning of the year, so that could be a contributing factor. Could be new books that I've been reading, and so maybe I need to read older books. I have very eclectic reading tastes. I don't have like my one genre that I read a ton of. I mean, maybe I would consider that historical fiction or nonfiction, but even then within those genres I read a whole bunch of stuff. I would say the biggest, most pleasant surprise is historical romance. I read A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting and absolutely loved that one. That was so much fun. I actually don't know why I haven't talked about this book yet, of a book that made me happy. This book made me really happy, and now I'm perusing my way through this historical romance genre. I know there's a lot out there. There's a lot of duds that aren't gonna work for me, but I'm on the hunt for ones that I think I will really enjoy. And I also think I'm just less scared to try fantasy or sci-fi sci-fi or just something different, because a lot of my reads have been duds. Like, I was very pleasantly surprised with Stephen King, and that's just something I never thought I'd try too. So again, I really like historical, but maybe different plays on historical, like historical romance or like alternate history or something to do with time travel and going back in time and dealing with history. I feel like that's something this year that I'm gravitating towards and hope to find more books of that I really love. Question 14, if you set any bookish goals for yourself this year, how are they going? I didn't really set any goals. I did make a 23 books to read in 2023, and I've read 8 of those, so not bad, but I have quite a few more to go, and I think I'm chugging along. I'm already doing better than I did last year with my 12 fiction and 12 nonfiction and 12 classics list. I barely read any of those in 2022 for some reason, but this year I feel like I'm making okay progress, and I'm somewhat participating in the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge and Buzzword-a-thon. I feel like I've sort of fallen off the radar in the last month or two on those, but overall I like challenges just to see what I can pick up that fit certain themes. But overall, life is a bit crazy, and it's only gonna get crazier in September, so I'm not really pushing myself to go out of the box and read anything that I have to or kind of set any goals. I'm just gonna see how it goes. So that's where I'm at right now. And lastly, number 15, what do you want to read next? I want to find a 5-star read that I love. I have some high hopes with books that I mentioned, my summer TBR, and that's kind of what I'm chugging along at. Maybe more of those books on my 23 books to try this year as well. So that's my focus. Hopefully one of those will be a win. I hope to read some more nonfiction, and I tend to really love nonfiction. I've had some amazing 5-star nonfiction reads in the past, and I want to find another nonfiction books that really just speaks to my soul. So we'll see. Nothing that I have to. I'm just hoping for a book that I love that needs to happen to me this summer. So fingers crossed it does. Well, thank you so much for being here and listening to me answer these questions as I talk about my year so far of reading. Here's hoping the latter half of the year is a bit more fun with reading. Thank you all so much for watching and being here, and I will see you guys in another video soon. Bye.